Ransomware is arguably today's most prolific cyber threat. This can cause a problem for small and medium-sized enterprises that don't have the internal resources or expertise to know where to start. Fortunately, the Institute for Security and Technology created the Ransomware Task Force to address the emerging national and economic security risk posed by ransomware. One of the many outcomes of this is the Blueprint for Ransomware Defense. It's a clear, actionable framework through which SMEs can defend against ransomware. The heart of the blueprint consists of a subset of safeguards found in version 8 of the CIS Critical Security Controls. The group of safeguards is referred to as Implementation Group 1 and represents a minimum standard of information security for all enterprises. This is referred to as essential cyber hygiene. The 14 foundational safeguards are the building blocks that are necessary to establish an enterprise's cybersecurity program. They also enable the implementation of actionable safeguards. The 26 actionable safeguards build on the foundational ones and are all about applying the technical controls needed to protect an enterprise's environment and defend against ransomware and other general, non-targeted cyber attacks. Focusing on 7 major areas, the blueprint helps defend against over 70% of the attack techniques associated with ransomware. The Blueprint for Ransomware Defense would not be possible without the hard work of several contributing organizations. To download the blueprint and take the steps needed to defend against ransomware, visit the IST website.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Brian Cute. I am the Director of Capacity and Resilience at the Global Cyber Alliance, and I'd like to welcome the attendees for webinar number 3 of our 5-part webinar series on the Blueprint for Ransomware Defense. We're being joined today by Karen Evans, the Managing Director of the Cyber Readiness Institute, Josh Franklin, the Senior Cybersecurity Engineer at the Center for Internet Security, and Shehzad Mirza, Chief Security Officer at CyberWA. We're also being joined by Felicia Stocchetti, Senior Cybersecurity Engineer at the Center for Internet Security, and importantly, a co-author of the Blueprint for Ransomware Defense. Today in webinar number 3, we are here to talk about actionable safeguards that small and medium-sized enterprises can adopt after they have implemented the foundational safeguards that were the focus of webinars number 1 and number 2. Specifically, our panelists will focus on how you can protect your organization from access control gaps, misconfigurations, and outdated software. Most importantly, our panelists are here to share with you their practical experience, to give you the confidence to take the next steps and further reduce your cybersecurity risks. I would like to thank the organizations listed here who contributed their time and energy to develop the blueprint with the shared goal of making it actionable for all SMEs. The blueprint itself is based on a subset of the Center for Internet Security's Essential Cyber Hygiene Safeguards, and the Blueprint for Ransomware Defense Working Group aligned the subset of safeguards to the National Institutes of Standards and Technology's Cybersecurity Framework Functions. The panelists and I want you to know that we understand that cybersecurity and ransomware defense can feel complex and even intimidating. The blueprint was developed to be manageable and to meet SMEs where they are as they take their first steps on their cybersecurity journey. The important thing for you is to get started. As part of this journey, you have implemented the foundational safeguards that we discussed in webinars number 1 and number 2. Going forward, effective security requires taking additional steps. The actionable safeguards that our panelists are going to discuss build on the foundational ones and are about applying the technical controls needed to protect your enterprise's environment. The focus of today's webinar is to review the actionable safeguards that address the importance of identify and protect. So as we move forward, we encourage you to pose any questions that you may have in the chat box. We'll be happy to share them with everyone and to answer them as best we can. So the goals for today's webinar is to address the following 4 topics. First, practitioner advice on managing access controls and the tools to help out. Second, how identity protection plays such an important role in ransomware defense and why multi-factor authentication is a game changer to your security. Third, best practices for software management. And fourth, methods for optimizing vulnerability and patch management processes. So now I'd like to formally welcome Karen Evans from Readiness Institute, Josh Franklin from the Center for Internet Security, Shehzad Mirza from CyberWA, and Valicia Stocchetti from the Center for Internet Security. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I would invite you at this time to just take a few minutes to introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do, and why your organization is involved with the Blueprint for Ransomware Defense. Karen, if you wouldn't mind kicking it off, and followed by Josh and Shehzad and Valicia.
So, Brian, thank you so much for that great introduction. And I'm the managing director of the Cyber Readiness Institute. And at CRI, we're very focused on the human behavior aspect of what happens and what is needed within an organization, specifically focused on small and mid-sized businesses. And throughout my career, it's always been what's critical is the leadership. So whether you're a 2-person small business, 1-person business, 1,000-person mid-sized business, you're using technology, but you have people at the heart of this issue. And the task force and the blueprint really outline successful steps that they can take. But it still comes down to the CEO, the leader, really creating that culture of cyber hygiene or cyber readiness, the way that we call it. It's all around cyber readiness so that they really are aware of what those risks are so that they can take these actions and that these actions become second nature to the organization.
Thank you, Karen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Franklin. I'm a senior cybersecurity engineer working on the CIS controls. I've been in the standards area for a little over a decade, working at NIST, primarily on election standards. When I moved to CIS, I really got to understand what the CIS controls are all about and who they're focused on, who they're focused towards. And the CIS controls really focus on prioritization and essential cyber hygiene, and that is why the CIS controls act as the foundation for this ransomware blueprint. I think it was a fantastic partnership, and it's somewhere where the CIS controls can really help smaller organizations make a big impact with very little resources.
Thank you, Josh. Shehzad.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shehzad Mirza. I'm currently the Chief Security Officer and VP of Organizational Protective Services at CyberWA. I've worn many hats over my careers in security. I've everywhere from working in security operations with Symantec and also with the Center for Internet Security on the multi-state ISAC side. Had a little blip with Ernst & Young working in the security management aspect and side of the house. Worked also for Global Cyber Alliance as the director of IT and security. Doing a lot of the practitioning stuff, like actually implementation and putting in things into effect, as well as many projects on that side in terms of DMARC, the GCA toolkit and such. But now I'm with CyberWA, and CyberWA, we're providing, guidance and assessments for organizations to determine what is their defense posture, where are they, how they rank in terms of their security posture, and what things they need to think about. And this is why it's important in terms of this and the ransomware blueprint, because ransomware is big. It's still ongoing. It seems to be the one thing that's not going away, like phishing. All right. So every year it's like ransomware seems to always be at least in the top 5, if not the top number one aspect of it. So something like the ransomware blueprint in terms of providing practices, providing guidance is key, and it's critical to have that, especially for small and medium-sized businesses who may not know about things or what direction to go or how to start in terms of doing what they need to do to protect against ransomware.
Thanks, Shehzad. And Valicia.
Thanks, Brian, and hello, everyone. So my name is Felicia Stoketty. I'm a senior cybersecurity engineer at the Center for Internet Security on the CIS controls team. Currently, I'm working on a lot of different projects, including the community defense model, the CIS risk assessment method, and some other white papers. But more importantly, like Brian said, I'm the co-author of the Blueprint for Ransomware Defense, which is why I'm here today. Previously to my current position, I actually worked in the MSISEC also, such as Shehzad did, and I was the manager for their computer emergency response team for 4 years. So did a lot of work with small state and government entities and help them recover from their incidents. So it's kind of nice to come full circle and now work on the proactive side and helping organizations become secure so that they can avoid hopefully an incident or at least mitigate the fallout from an incident.
Thank you, Felicia. So let's turn to our first topic, which is practitioner advice on managing access controls and the tools to help out. So generally speaking, for the audience, what are the important next steps to take on access controls and credential management? Karen, starting with you, what advice would you give an SME leader who is trying to manage this particular issue?
Well, I think this really comes down to, and you've done a series of foundational activities, but all small businesses, mid-sized businesses, they're using technology, and you need to look at what are those critical services that I already have. So for example, payroll, right? Or how do I take receipts? They're all using certain technologies that are out there. And it's really simple about like who is doing what role in the business, like who takes the receipts in, who processes the invoices, who does these certain things. You've already thought about access control from those types of business roles. What you're doing now is trying to then translate those in a way onto the technology that you're using so that the same person, so think of it as, accounts receivable, accounts payable, the same person who creates an invoice isn't the same person receiving the invoice, acknowledging that it's there, and then making the payment. Unless you're a one-person shop, which you can then trust yourself. So, it's how you think about the business. And then what we're asking you to do is then translate it into the technical environment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Josh, from a CIS perspective, what's most important for an SME to know about access controls and tools?
Yeah. So, in this webinar, we're at that slightly higher level of the, actionable items. And so things like establishing an access granting and an access revoking process have, we're assuming things like that have already been taken care of. From the CIS controls essential cyber hygiene perspective, there's 4 specific things that I wanted to talk about. So the first one is managing default counts on enterprise assets and software. So if you buy a new software package, there are going to be counts most likely already set up with it. This could also be if you buy a new piece of hardware that you put into your network, there are definitely going to be counts that are default. You want to make sure that you're properly managing those, and if you're going to still use them, make sure that you understand how they can be used to help your org, and not have someone else from outside of your organization take advantage of passwords that might be well known. Like if you get a router from Comcast, there's going to be a default password on that. The second thing is to use unique passwords. I know we are all essentially living in this terrible purgatory of passwords everywhere. We're trying to get new forms of authentication into everyone's hands. Someone here is going to say FIDO at some point. I absolutely know. But the fact of the matter is that passwords are still with us. They're part of our daily lives. And so we still need to make sure that we are basically using unique passwords for all of our big accounts. The third thing is to disable dormant accounts. That sounds a little bit scary, but essentially folks come into a small business and then folks leave the small business. And you want to make sure that folks who's left, that those accounts are still not active, that they're still not able to be used, especially if someone left in maybe not on the best terms. You want to make sure that person can't access your payroll system, right? Or maybe access your updated client list. And so making sure that those accounts don't necessarily function properly are what we're really looking for here. And then the final thing is to restrict administrator privileges that are used for admin accounts, essentially. And so administrator accounts are accounts that are super users. They have global access. You can do lots of fun and terribly useful things with these accounts. These are essentially accounts that have full run over any system. You want to make sure that folks aren't necessarily using administrator accounts to buy cereal off of Amazon or to be purchasing audiobooks or whatever. If you're going to have a person with administrator privileges, those privileges need to only be used for short spurts of time and for very specific tasks. We don't want to make sure that those accounts can be taken advantage of if, for instance, ransomware gets on on an enterprise system. I'll also point out that CIS has an information security policy template for access and credential management that we just released, I think, yesterday. So that's something new that you can just look on our website, and it's just a good baseline policy that you can take and use and mold to whatever your whims are.
That's a great resource, Josh. Everyone will get the pointer to CIS for everyone. So Shehzad, from your experience in operations, what are some of the things that cause an organization to be vulnerable to ransomware attacks through access controls?
And continuing on with what Karen and Josh had talked about, it's one thing that a lot of organizations do make the mistake of is it's just giving everyone access to everything. You don't have just one admin, especially, you don't have one admin, you have multiple people who are administrators. They can do whatever they want on their laptops, even if whether you're working from home or you're working in an office, because there's always some excuse. Well, I need to be able to download something whenever I need to download it. I need to be able to install whatever I need to install on my laptop. But the thing is by giving those level of credentials or level of access, you're now opening up yourself to attacks. Especially with ransomware and any type of malware attack, like Josh mentioned, if they're an admin and they're visiting websites and they don't happen to know that there's a malicious website, or they're downloading something they shouldn't be downloading and going to an untrusted site, they want to get the latest Microsoft Teams or, latest Outlook, but instead of letting the official tools actually do it, they go to some other random site and start downloading that stuff and installing it. It's not, and that, you'd be surprised. People actually end up doing stuff like that, and they shouldn't be doing that. But if you have those controls in place where you say, okay, no, you know what? You're not an admin. These people have the admin roles. If you need a tool, just go through the proper process. Yes, it can be a little bit painstaking to go through some of this, but you're putting those controls in there for a purpose, to protect against those types of things, right? And this is where I kind of go, and you may have heard this word with zero trust model, just to break it apart. Karen's laughing about it. It's a buzzword, but it's not. It's also something that's not really that complicated. Zero trust model in this sense means don't trust anyone, right? Don't trust anyone with whatever, unless they absolutely need access to it. They'll have a reason for giving that or needing that level of access, right? And it forces them to really think about it. Well, do I really need to do that? Do I really need to get access to that particular type of file or particular type of site or anything like that? And it helps you. And then you can just build from there. So nobody has access, but then you slowly give access to whomever actually needs access to what they need access to.
So, Brian, I think one of the things that we really, especially from actionable items, listening to what Josh and Shehzad are talking about, and what the owner of the company really needs to consider is The other piece that plays into this is, what type of resources are you really using? And so Shehzad is talking about, like, if I'm a small business, the computer that I'm using is probably the same computer that my family uses to do other things.
Yep.
And so as we talk about some of these steps, we really have to think about the easier you make it for your employees, right, then the easier you're going to make it for the criminals, because what's really happened is you're lowering the protections that you have that are easily implemented. And so I know Josh brought up some things, but this is like, CRI, what we have is a starter kit. So because we could tech out here, the three of us, really quickly, but the starter kit really helps a small business work through some of the things that we're talking about that are the actionable items. If you're smaller, and maybe now you're participating in this webinar and you're like, oh, I have to go back and look at the blueprint to find out what some of the foundational things are that I should think about. But there's resources like we have them at CRI, I know the Global Security Alliance, you guys have them too, that really help a small business get started so that they can implement these actionable items.
That's right. And we're going to have a slide at the end that has links to some of those resources that Karen mentioned. We'll also make sure, not sure if we can get it posted in this webinar, but the resource, the policy that Josh just mentioned at CIS, we'll make sure we get a link embedded in this slides after the webinar, so you can go there as well. These resources are out there and they are designed to be easy to use. And so please seek them out. Let's shift to topic. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just one more thing to add to what Karen was saying too. I mean, especially for small businesses, it's better to start now, because the more you grow, the harder it's going to be to take away things from people, right? Because it's just, and if you want 2 people, it's easier to do it. You can make them whoever what they need, but then you get to like 100, 50, 100, it's gonna be harder to take away access and take away roles and change roles and adjustments. So if you can do that now, it'll save you time later on.
It's great advice. Great advice. Let's shift to topic 2, which is how identity protection plays such an important role in ransomware defense, and why multi-factor authentication is a game changer for your security. Karen, I understand Cyber Readiness Institute just released the results of a survey that it conducted on this topic. Would you mind speaking to the findings?
Oh, sure. I'm very excited because one of the core, we call it core 4. So we're focused on 4 core issues. But one of them is, and it's not going to surprise you what they are, right? Passwords, phishing, removable media, and automatic updates. So that's the other reason why the blueprint's pretty exciting to us. But passwords, like we wanted to validate, is it intuitive what we know? So we did a global survey of small and mid-sized businesses, and I'll just give you 3 key statistics. 55% of the small businesses, mid-sized businesses that we surveyed said they were not aware of multi-factor authentication or the benefits associated with it. 54% says they haven't implemented it. And 20% said, I don't have an employee who understands it or is trained in order for me to implement and use multi-factor authentication. So I think the lead statistic that is really stunning, but we validated, is they're just not aware of multi-factor authentication and the benefits that it can bring.
Yep, it is surprising. And the folks in the security community, cybersecurity community, like us, of course, know MFA, want to promote MFA, but there seems to be a gap there that's very important. Josh, when considering implementing MFA, how would an SME know what tools are reliable or which ones to use?
That's definitely a difficult question. Typically, CIS recommends that folks look to experts and other organizations like folks here, that are actually working hand in hand with small businesses, understand their problems and their use cases, and then are recommending tools. So like the GCA toolkit, for instance, From like a CIS perspective, we actually recommend 4 separate things to really help out here. So the first one is requiring multi-factor authentication for externally exposed applications. And I know that sounds a little bit funky, but essentially, if you have some sort of application, some sort of website or portal that is touching the internet in any way, shape, or form, if someone can access it on their phone, essentially, we are recommending that folks put multi-factor authentication on that system. Additionally, if folks are working from home and maybe VPNing in, that's another place that folks need to have multi-factor authentication. And then I know we talked about super user access or administrative access, earlier, where someone essentially has God mode on a machine. That's, another place that, again, we need multi-factor access. And this isn't just because we want folks to spend time, resource, and money on things that, maybe are just a little bit important. These things are highlighted because they're actively being exploited. They're common points of successful attacks. And then from like a ransomware perspective as well, CIS also has highlighted here, basically having a isolated instance of your recovery data. So all of your backups and all of your information, making sure that is, maybe on a drive somewhere that's not connected to the internet. And if you have a fire or flood, it wouldn't typically be killed inside of that same natural disaster.
Thanks, Josh. Shehzad, there may be some small to mid-sized enterprises out there who are already consistently using strong passwords, right? They've got that practice, that good practice. A fair question would be like, why isn't that enough? Multi-factor authentication could strike you as complicated, complex. This might be an additional cost for my company. Why do I need to take this step?
And again, it's like with passwords, you can have strong passwords. I mean, people go as far as 15 characters. Some people go as far as 24 characters. I've known people who've done 24 characters and they actually utilize it. But the problem is still hackers can easily break passwords now. I mean, they have the tools, the resources. Computing power is so much faster. Most people can use their smartphones nowadays to crack passwords. So having an extra layer of protection, which is what multi-factor authentication is doing, is reducing the risks of actual account compromises and access to information. Because they got the password, but they don't have your multi-factor authentication token, because that's what's going to be asked for. It's going to be required to put that in after you put in your username and password. So at least you have that additional layer of protection. And it can get frustrating, admittedly, at times, especially as an admin, to actually go through the whole process. But think about what you're protecting and why you need to protect that, right? And as Karen mentioned before, if you make it easy for yourself to access this stuff or get into things, if it's easy for you, it's easy for the attacker or for the hacker to do it as well. And in terms of, do you need these massive tools or purchases or things like that to do what you need to do? You don't. I mean, especially as a small business, you may already have their tools that you need already. So like if you're using, like, for example, we're not, just some tools that most small businesses use, like Microsoft Office 365, and people use Google Workspace. They have multi-factor built in. It's just a matter of you going in and turning it on. That's all you have to really do. I mean, it sounds simple, but there's a few steps and actions you have to do, and how you do it. There's a lot of resources out there on how to do it, and it forces your users to do it. Now, in terms of what do the users have to do? You don't need to purchase a token, because there's things like tokens, like RSA tokens, people may have heard of. It's like a physical device that has numbers on it and changes. You don't have to purchase those. As your organization grows and you get larger, maybe you may want to move in that direction. But the options you have that are built in, you can download free authentication tools, right? Microsoft has one, Google has one, all these, other tools, different resources have them. They're free. They just download it to their phones, punch in what they need to do and just follow the steps in terms of implementing a multi-factor authentication tool. Some of them are just simple SMS messages, so it sends you a text messages. Some of them are email capabilities, right? SMS and email, if you go more deep dive into it, they're not the most recommended ones to use, but it is still a layer. So you should still use them. Even if that's your options, use it, because you still have that additional layer, right? Because even if that password is cracked, they need to still go into like emails, or they have to get your phone in order to get certain things, or get that token, or get the SMS message that you get. But at least you have those layers of protection in place, and that's what's going to be important. But again, it's free, right? It's built into the tools you already have. You just need to go through the process and enabling and turning it on for your account.
So it's great to know that those resources are available, that they're free, that they're as simple as turning them on. And in keeping with the spirit of the blueprint, it just take that first step.
Take that first step. And Brian, the one thing I want to really highlight for the audience here is this is a great example of, and you said it when you opened up with the question, of where we're a victim of our own technology or our own terminology. We're using terminology here that people don't necessarily. So this is our big mantra at CRI, where we're trying to demystify technology, and we're talking about multi-factor authentication. We're talking about all these tools, and they say they don't know the benefits, but in actuality, everybody is using some form of it today. And because other companies are putting it in place. If you're using an iPad, you're using it. Okay, so if you're using these technologies, you're using it because of the way that they're validating that it's really you, and that it's really your device, and it's really you trying to access those services. So it's not as hard as you think to be able to work through and put that extra layer of defense, especially as it relates to your business, because you want to protect your business assets.
Perfect. Well, let's transition to the third topic, which is best practices for software management. And the question is, why is it important to ensure authorized software is currently supported? And what are the risks of unauthorized software? If you could each speak to both those elements a bit. Karen?
So I'm going to start purely from a small business after I managed large enterprises like the federal government as a whole, as the former federal CIO, is that when you really look at this, and so what CRI really pushes is automatic updates, because a small and mid-sized business is not going to have an IT shop that's going to be looking at the applications if you've homegrown something and then test what the releases are. But you are going to have probably using either an Apple device, or you're using a Microsoft, operating system type of device, and you get automatic updates. So we advocate that the automatic updates go forward, because you don't have the resources to test. We ask you to turn those on. That's one of the key things that we're saying, because the larger companies are the ones who are doing, the testing on the operating systems, how you're using some of this software. And when they say you need to do the update, you should just have the automatic updates on. I'll let my colleagues here go into the real technical things for the mid-sized businesses, where you do have, some type of IT staff that's going to work through some of the prioritization of these patches. But for a really pure small business play with no IT staff, my recommendation is turn those automatic updates on. Thank
you. Josh, your thoughts?
I mean, Karen, she's absolutely right here. I mean, from a threat perspective, right? What are the risks of, unauthorized software? Unauthorized software could be malicious software, right? Any malware on a system could be considered unauthorized software. So obviously we don't want malware on our systems, not just because of ransomware, but for spyware and a whole bunch of other types of things. For the other more, let's say, pernicious aspect of unknown software, that's going to be employees installing software without your knowledge and without you managing. Karen's so right about the automatic updates. And if you don't know that there is a piece of software installed on your computer, then you can't configure automatic updates for that application. And that's and if that happens, you're not going to have a good time. And so that's the big takeaway here. And we also have a new policy on software asset management that we just released. And inside of that software asset management policy, what you'll see is some of the more foundational topics about doing the extremely boring thing of going through and understanding the big pieces of software that your organization is using and making a software software inventory. Because through that software inventory, you can then go in like a little worksheet or checklist type matter and make sure each one of those applications has automatic updates turned on.
Thank you, Josh. Shehzad, automatic updates, is that a little bit tricky, a challenging thing to do, or do most softwares make that an easy step?
Most approved software will do that and make that step and make that available. Just to make that clear, what Josh was saying too, because I mean, it's very important to have, and I'm going to stress another thing that Josh said too, is to have that inventory list, but make it an approved inventory list. Because the idea is approved inventory list is because whatever is on that list, that is what employees can use. That is what staff can use. And it makes it easier for an admin to be able to say, okay, well, we have this tool. This is what the tool's capability is, and that it has an auto update feature. So they know that these things can be turned on, rather than trying to go and say, and have all your users be admins and start downloading stuff and you have no idea what they have on their machines. And then that just becomes just even more problematic. You have 10 people in your organization. They all have different applications. They're using different tools. Which one has auto update? Which one doesn't have auto update? Because you don't know what's on there. You have no control over it, and it's just there. So having that inventory is going to be very key to be able to, because then again, as an admin or from the security perspective, it forces the users to say, hey, this is a tool that I want to use. Then the admin or the IT person or security person can get together and say, hey, is it already on the list? Do we have a tool that's already being used that's similar to what they're asking for? You could potentially save money that way. And then second, and it could be just say, okay, what are the security issues with this particular type of tool? Is it bad? Is it good? Is it from a trusted source? Because if it's a tool that's coming from Microsoft, okay, it may make it a little bit easier for you. But if it's coming from, I don't know, evil.com, then you're going to be like, okay, well, is this really the proper site to go to? Is it a tool that, is going to have security issues or has been having security issues, or there have been no updates whatsoever? You have zero control over it. You just download it, implement it, and that's it. And there haven't been patches for 6 years or updates for 6 years. That may make you want to kind of question whether that tool is useful or, should it actually be used?
So, Brian, I would like to tie something back to both what Josh and Shehzad said and kind of tie back again to the first actionable item that we've talked about. So, which this really gets down to roles and responsibilities within an organization, right? And then it translates into the technical environment. So one of the things that CRI does is we have a certified cyber leader, but in essence, what we're asking is that there's one person that works with the head of the organization. So if you're a two-person organization, one person is looking at the applications that you download, because there's the other side of, if you download a lot of free tools, you better make sure you know what free tools you're downloading, right? Mm-hmm. So we're saying go to trusted sites with this, but the cyber leader actually takes on a lot of the decision-making that Josh and Shehzad are talking about, that says, hey, we're only going to have these types of software. And then I need to have a software inventory list. And so this really gets to the culture of the organization where the CEO, you could be 2, 10, 50, 100, picks a person so that you can create that organization and create that culture that allows this one person to be the leader that does and leads the rest of the employees as they grow about, okay, we're not going to make it this easy, right? We're going to make the laptops look like this. These are the authorized applications that you can use. This is how I'm going to configure these things. And then that's how the culture grows. And that's how these actionable items become ingrained into the actual business, everyday business of what a small business does.
There's also important too, is like, going on to that is there's no, you don't, again, there's free resources. You don't have to go back out there and go get this huge thing where you have to get some sort of software inventory application that's going to go out and do it. You can start off as a simple spreadsheet. That's what CIS has, a great spreadsheet. Like Josh mentioned, that just download the spreadsheet and fill it in. It's maybe takes a little bit of time, but at least you have that. Once you start now, you'll have your list, and then that list is going to grow as your company grows. But you have the list there, and it's everything that is going and it's starting. And then like access control, it's built into what the tool.
It's built right into the spreadsheet, built into the application. And so if you
have all the resources there, they're all built in.
Yeah, and you go to, we have it. We have a playbook that starts, I know GCA has it, CIS has it. And this is why, we're all so excited about this piece. But the key is, let's start and then build that culture and continue it on so that your business continues to grow as a profitable business and you become a big business and you're no longer a small and mid-sized business.
Great stuff. Thank you all. Let's just spend a few minutes watching the clock on our fourth topic, which is methods for optimizing vulnerability and patch management processes. Another key element here. Generally speaking, what are some lessons learned from failure to address these issues, and what can be done to ensure they are well managed? Karen?
Well, this is one of these things where, I really speak a lot to, if you're going to have some, and I'm going to just use this as an example. A lot of times when a small business starts, they bring in a server, where they have Microsoft Exchange on-prem. And having it on-prem, if you aren't paying attention to it based on everything else that we've been talking about, the patch management, the vulnerabilities, everything becomes critical at that point. And that's a critical access point. And, my argument is some of the best management things here is there are a lot of opportunities for small and mid-sized businesses to take advantage of services that are out in the cloud. You have to know what your data is. But some of these activities are better suited for a larger company like Microsoft if you're using, and we've already talked about, most small businesses are either using Google Workspace or Office 365. So they're going to do some of that basic management for you. You're still going to be responsible, as Josh and Shehzad said, for the applications that you're using locally.
Thank you. Josh, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to kind of say this again, and it's just the actual patch management aspect really is, automated updates. And so I think that, good patch management is sort of a precursor to vulnerability management. Most of the time that the industry handles vulnerabilities is that we ship an update, we ship a patch or a security update. So from a CIS perspective, the low-hanging fruit here for patch management is making sure that your operating systems are updating in an automated manner. So just set that setting, make sure that all the approved software on your systems that they're going to be, updating to. And then we have some more fun things. If you're in a larger business where you have things like firewalls and other network appliances, those things need updates as well. And then from a cloud perspective, which is where a lot of folks are really going to, most of the time, that's the picture there is a little more fuzzy, so you need to understand what your responsibilities are in terms of updating those systems.
Thank you. Shehzad.
And this is going to be another key point. It's just like, this is, we talked about access control. Those are ways and vectors, but this is a major vector that people that take advantage of to try to get into your system, because, you may not have passed an application right away because you just can't do it, or you skipped an operating system update because you're in the middle of something and you just forgot to do it. or you just delayed it. And that's where they're going to take advantage of it. Even if they're not an admin, they're going to take a user account and get into your systems by using this mechanism because of those reasons and those situations where people, as small businesses, will delay things, will delay the patch, will delay the update that needs to be done. But it's critical to make sure that you have the process to do it right away. Even like Karen mentioned before, auto update. Have it auto update, but don't push off the auto update. Don't push it off just because it's auto updating. So some things may not update in the background, right? They may just do it on their own and let it do. You may not even realize that they're auto updating. But things like your laptop's operating system or your desktop's operating system, you can't delay those kinds of things. You got to make sure they do it. So some of these you can actually schedule the auto update to occur the off hours. So let it do it on the off hours when you're not busy. So let it, just don't shut off your machine. Right? Remember to leave your machines on and things like that. But but it is going to be very important because that's what they're going to take advantage of. This is why Apple and Microsoft, Google, they send these updates because they want to make sure that those security holes or back doors and things like that are patched, that they're taken care of, and they're better protecting their customers in this case. So it's important to get them done right away.
Thanks, Shehzad. So now we're going to transition to questions and answers, and then we'll have some closing remarks from the panelists. So one question I have is, what can I do to stop phishing attacks from getting into my company devices? As shocking as that data point you had, Karen, about the lack of awareness of MFA, I think phishing is one of those things that most people have at least heard about. So what can be done to stop phishing attacks from getting into your company's devices?
Well, before we tech out on some of this,
go right ahead.
Okay, I do want to bring up one thing that CRI does is because again, it's a training aspect, right? It's really making sure your employees are aware of what's happening. There's a human aspect. I mean, even when you look at some of the big attacks that have happened, right? And they have multi-factor authentication. What really comes down to it is it's still a human on the other side that just got barraged so much that they went ahead and authenticated somebody into the system. And so we do Phishing Friday, and we send out, and we have a place like now where you can subscribe to it. And what we do is we try. I mean, it's really getting sophisticated. And so what we try to do is give examples every week, and based on what's happening, like, during the holiday season or during tax season. But they're really getting really sophisticated about what's happening. It's not just some of the, basic, hey, look at the URL type of thing. And so we send out examples every week so that you can use that with your employees and just say, hey, here's the weekly tip. Take a look at this. If you see something like this, just don't act on it. Just, don't act on it. And by the way, I'm never going to send an invoice to you that says pay this person right away. I mean, that's a big one that's out there. So, I mean, it's still the human that has to be trained. So now I'm going to let my colleagues go into some of the other things on this.
Thank you.
Just to play off of what Karen is saying, is because she's absolutely right. I mean, in a way, without your staff knowing it, they're technically part of the security team. Right. They are. They just don't know that. It's probably not in their job description or anything that's written there, but they're the ones who are going to see what's going on. They're the ones who's going to see what's happening, right? So they're the ones who are going to get the phishing email, and that may not be used, like the technical tools that are out there, like whatever your anti-phishing tools or whatever, may not catch, but the end user is going to be the one, the employee, the staff is going to get that email and see that email. So they need to know, what do they do now? What actions do they take? Do they just delete it and ignore it? Or should they actually inform somebody, let somebody know that this is something that got through? So that's it. It does start with the staff. If they don't know what to do, they're most likely either going to click the link, or they're just going to delete it and not tell anybody. And then somebody else in the organization is probably going to click on the link thinking that it's actually legitimate. Right. So, there are tons of technical tools that you can use. There's, a lot of the tools would be stuff that's built into whatever system you're using, whether it be Google Workspace, Office 365. Some of them are enabled by default. I mean, I would recommend taking the time just to kind of go through the settings, get to know what they are, where certain things are. Because in some cases, the phishing is still going to get through. I mean, you could have the most complex tool or the most sophisticated tool in there, there's going to be one or two that are still going to sneak past or sneak through. Just know how to use your current systems to block those kinds of things if you needed to block it. So that's why I recommend taking the time to actually go through and learn some of the settings that are there. And then there's other tools that they're out there, going back to GCA. You have your Quad 9, right? Quad 9, or, which is basically a tool that you can implement and put onto each and every single laptop, or if it's an organization, an office, you just put it on your router. And I'll let you go to the Quad 9 website to see how to actually go through the process of it. Because what was it again, Brian? It takes like maybe 7 minutes to implement it.
At most.
And I think, I forget the age of it was a 6 or 7 year old that basically did it themselves and then went through their teachers and their students and told them how to all do it. So that's how easy or simple it should be to go through that whole process. But the idea behind those kinds of tools is that it blocks, or even if that phishing email gets through, it's usually a link, or it's going to go back to a bad domain. It prevents that access to those domains and it further reduces that risk. So those are some of the things you can do.
That's great. Let's go to one other question. What is the most important thing I should do next? And let's just go around the table on that. We'll start with you, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I would say download the blueprint and start looking at these foundational and actionable steps, making sure that you're putting some of these baseline essential cyber hygiene items into practice in your network. People have said it here earlier. You just need to get started. It's a lot, but just get started on your journey. Everyone's journey is going to be different, but you want to make sure that you're not the odd organization out. Everyone in the industry is slowly starting to do many of the practices that we're doing here today. So keep with the beat. Feel the beat. Make sure that you are you're also riding that same cybersecurity wave.
Thanks, Karen.
So in addition to what Josh has said, because once you download that blueprint and you look at it, please don't be intimidated. So my next recommendation would be to go to the CRI website. And as soon as you go to there, you'll get a starter kit. And that starter kit complements the blueprint. And that's where you start. It says, because the first thing, like we've put a lot, and if this is your first webinar with this group, it's like, okay, so now where do I start? Well, get the starter kit, because everything that we're talking about leads to other tools, right? Like leads to, hey, I can put the policies together, that leads to the spreadsheets, that works you through, because Shehzad's talking about, hey, when I get a phishing thing, it's what we call an incident response plan. Is it an incident? Should I report it? How do I isolate it? All of that is in a starter kit. We have them, you have them. And you need those starter kits so that you can get started today, so that you have that foundation. So following on Josh's riff there about, the cyber wave, the other part that I think is really key to this is it's about your relationships, and you're in a larger ecosystem now. And, COVID really showed how interconnected everybody is. So you want to be a good partner, and a way to be a good business partner as a small and mid-sized business is to get started and to get these foundational practices and create that culture within your business so that you're a good partner within the supply chain.
And Karen, let me just pick up that last point, because we've spoken about how being in certain supply chains, there are already requirements, cybersecurity requirements in place. And it's certainly, you could imagine that being in broader supply chains, that these types of requirements may be coming down the road. Can you share what you know about existing requirements and what may be coming?
Well, and so a lot of this, especially if you're a small or mid-sized business, like in the defense industrial base, right? Or in energy, or in oil and natural gas, any of these places, the regulations are there. The standards are coming. CISA just released its performance goals overall, right? And they're foundational. They map right against this framework. And what we're all trying to do is get the foundation done and make it easy. So these tools, like in the case of CRI, the tools are all there for free. what we realize is you have to make the time commitment. But if you want to participate in the ecosystem, you make the time commitment now, then again, you're going to be a good partner, and you're going to end up, you'll have these foundational pieces in place so you can do the self-attesting and say, yes, I have good security practices in place. Yes, I have a business continuity plan. Oh yeah, I do have an incident response plan, and I do know how to notify my partners.
Thanks very much. Shehzad, most important next thing to do.
I'm not sure if there's much more that I can add to what Karen and Josh have already said. I mean, because you do need a starting point, and the tools that Karen and Josh have said, those are the tools where you need to start. And that's what's great about these, because a lot of people, the issue that they have is like, oh, hey, I went to NIST and they say to do this, but I don't know how to do that. So you have CRI starter kit that will tell you, this is not only where this is where you need to start, but this is how you need to start. This is what you can do to do, and the resource you can point to. The GCA toolkit, the small businesses, that also lays it out, and then tells you what tools are available. That's where, and that's key point. You need to get started. Start somewhere. Start with CRI. Start with the GCA toolkit. Use these other resources that are out there to get going and moving. And just to stress another point that Karen mentioned, I mean, it's a community of people that are out there. Use that community. GCA has a community forum that has the small business section. Mm-hmm. Use that tool to ask questions of people to say, look, this is what I'm trying to do. What can I do? What do I need to do? Or how, where can I go to get started? Or where, those kinds of questions. But that's a place it's a safe place to go and ask those questions, right? You're not going to have people, it's vetted. It's, you don't have, it's a trusted site, but there's other forums, I'm sure. CRI probably, I'm not sure if you guys have a forum as well.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so use those forums, use those communication tools to ask the experts, ask the people where to go, what kind of tools, because they may tell you like, hey, instead of, don't spend the thousands of dollars that you need to do on it. You're a small business. You only have 10 employees. You can use this tool here that's, could be potentially free. So it's helpful to have those communication lines and build those relationships with people.
Hey, Brian, one thing that Shehzad just brought up is NIST, and people do go to NIST. NIST does have a reference for small and mid-sized businesses of free tools as well. And so I know we're there. I'm sure CIS is there. I'm sure GCA is there. And so that's the other place. So when you start looking for free tools, and you should go to, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, everybody talks about NIST. They have done a process, right, where all our tools are listed on one place for small and mid-sized businesses as well. So you can go to that place as well and get the tools. And so then you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to remember, all these other groups, but NIST does do it, and CISA has it too. But the NIST one, they've gone through and they vetted it, and so I think that one may be a little bit easier for this audience to use.
Yeah, and I think that theme's coming back. To me, at least, Karen, you mentioned early on that the cybersecurity community can sometimes be a victim of its own terminology, right? And deep in the weeds and deep in technological terms. And at the end of the day, there really are a number of resources that have been designed to be accessible, designed to be easy to use. And, as I like to say, you'll surprise yourself at what you're able to implement and put in place to start protecting your business. So there are a wide range of resources that are designed to be used by small businesses today. And the theme from the working group, of course, is just take that first step and then keep building across your organization. As Karen was saying, you have to have some training of employees. That's an important piece of the puzzle. And then there are the other resources that can provide protections and defenses that give you a more comprehensive defense against ransomware. So I hope that those threads and themes were coming through for everyone in the audience today. I'd like to just give the panelists one last opportunity. If there's a closing thought you'd like to share. And I tell you what, let's start out with Felicia. If you have any closing thoughts on the conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I mean, certainly everyone has offered some great advice, and I don't know if I could add too much to that I would already say, but I would also add that, I think Shehzad mentioned it, don't break the bank, right? If something's going to cost you so much money that's putting you out of business, then obviously that is not the right choice. perhaps for your organization. And then also, somebody mentioned fostering the relationships. That's super important, right? Nothing is in security is developed in a vacuum. You have to foster the relationships in order to really grow in that area. And then the last thing I would say is don't chase after the shiny tool, right? So everyone always thinks like, oh, this is the tool. It does, 9,000 things. So this must be what I need. But, focus on the activity and then let the tool like make sure that's fit to your organization's needs before you go and just spend X amount of dollars, on something that might be way more than you need or way less than you need.
Thank you, Felicia. Josh, closing thought?
Yeah. I mean, what I would really recommend is that, we've already talked about taking that first step, but, really take a look at that low-hanging fruit. And I want to say that, start with this specific step, but there's going to be a number of things that we've already mentioned here that are available in the blueprint. When you download it, everyone's low-hanging fruit is going to be a little bit different. You might have a good friend who already knows about some subject, or another small business in your area that really has already been a little bit further on this journey. And so I would say use what you can, be scrappy, and figure out what the easy first steps are that have the least amount of barriers to just get you, to just get this ball rolling.
Thank you, Josh. Shehzad, closing thought?
So one of the thoughts of that is it's going to be important. Know what you have, right? Know what resources you have. Know what tools you already have in place, right? The tools that you may have already purchased already or have in place, like your Google Workspace and Office 365, because learn that tool, see what's in that tool before you go out trying to get something else, right? We talked about multi-factor authentication. It's built in already. You don't need to buy some other tool at this point, stage and point to start using and implement, because you probably already have the tools and the things that you need already in place, right? You don't need some major patch management tool. You have patch management built in, especially, if you're using cloud services, hey, that's great. They're doing it for you. But now you have to worry about is your operating system. And if you have Office on your laptops, those are auto updates. Make sure those kinds of things are implemented. So knowing what you have and how what you have already in place, go through those in detail, learn the settings, learn the configurations before going out and making additional purchases and buying new things.
Thanks, Shehzad. Karen, for the close.
For the close, so I agree with what all my colleagues have said, but the one thing that I want to add is I realize that time is also a resource for small and mid-sized businesses. And so that balancing and that choice of making the time to commit for this, I know it affects, some of the things you're doing. If you're the CEO on this call, please make the time. I know you have to balance that against your other resources, but you want to create that culture. And if you're in a small organization, then go out, look at some of these resources, volunteer to be the cyber leader, and then go to your boss and say, hey, I'm willing to take on this responsibility because it's not going to cost us more. It's just a commitment of my time and your time to the organization so that we can grow and we can be good partners with everyone in our ecosystem.
Thank you. So with that, thank you for attending. We hope this was helpful. We hope you now know there's some resources that are at your disposal, at least these two, the blueprint, of course, and the report from the Ransomware Task Force. We've mentioned a few others. We'll make sure we embed those in the slides that will be available afterwards, so that you can go to those resources and take the next steps on your journey to cybersecurity. So thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.